I want to start off this morning by reading a piece that resonates or came forth from one of my favorite spiritual people in this world, and that is Joseph Campbell. And he brought together a seminal work that I think is really incredible called The Hero's Journey. And Joseph Campbell says, vulnerability acts as a catalyst, appearing initially as fear and a refusal of the call. A fear and a refusal of the call, ultimately leading to a deeper self-knowledge and reliance upon facing inner truths and discomforts, transforming the hero from being merely strong to truly courageous and relatable. It's the bridge between the ordinary and the extraordinary self. Recently, we celebrated a birthday of Reverend Dr. Carolyn McEwen Fish, who was the person who established this center here many, many years ago, decades ago. And as part of that celebration, there was a video of her speaking some years ago about how her consciousness around putting this center together and carrying forward the teachings and the truths of our teaching of New Thought, religious science, metaphysics. And I'm going to paraphrase what I heard her say because I can't remember, what she said. But I was here at that celebration, and there was a lot going on. And when that video played, I found it touched me really profoundly. And basically she said, when I started this center, I wanted to bring forward every idea, every talk, every professional, every workshop, every class, everything I could bring together to help people move beyond the belief systems within their consciousness that were holding them back. I don't think she said it that way, but that's how I took that in. And I remember, I think that touched me so deeply because what I realize, because I am a fan of Joseph Campbell, the flash that came up in my mind of that was not from the standpoint of someone who occupies the space I occupy today as a minister, as a practitioner, but occupying a space of when I first came into this teaching. Because when I first came into this teaching, there were two parts. First of all, there was the call. And we all know that. Whether that call is academically, professionally, culturally, relationally, whatever that is, anytime we begin to step from a comfort zone of some kind to move into something else, that is the call. That is something that resonates deep inside each and every one of us. And I'm so amazed at the levels of consciousness, because what Dr. Carolyn was talking about there are levels of consciousness which can hold us back. She called them the belief systems, the personal belief systems. In some way, shape, or form, I am not enough, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve, whatever it is. You fill in the blanks. The call. And then the second piece that spoke to me when I heard her say that is the vulnerability. The vulnerability of what I would call the refugee. And I'm going to circle back and really flesh that out in a moment. But what I mean by that is I got my little suitcase and I'm leaving behind something, and I'm sort of walking forward like a lot of us did after the Paradise Fire. Remember that? A lot of us have done after a loss. A lot of us have done when, in some way, shape, or form, something has fallen apart even if it's completely interior, in here, okay? And we somehow know that higher self somehow knows there's something else, but we're not sure what that is. The call. And I thought about Reverend Carolyn, and later on, I'm so grateful I've experienced this myself, of being that person that stands by the door of the class or the workshop or the talk or the idea or the seminar or whatever it is. Greetings, refugee. And and walking in and, hi, lady, it's nice to meet you. I don't know what I'm going to get in here, but I know. And the reason I know that is because the way that I found this teaching was, and I had a religious background that hadn't worked for me. It gave me some sort of a foundation. There's nothing bad about it. It's nothing evil or anything. It just, it was foundational, but it just didn't work for me at some point. Isn't that the way it is? Isn't that the way it is? When the call comes, something's not working. And I was at a point in my life where an awful lot wasn't working. And someone said, hey, Andy, there's this place you can go called, at that time, the Church of Religious Science. Well, I heard that word church, so I was just about out, right? It's like, oh, I know how to do church. I can go in there and I can sit and I can listen to some guy and then I can leave and pick up 2 donuts and go home. I can do that. So what do you think is there? And what I found was there was a place that put me in touch with my vulnerability as a refugee. Now, why am I saying refugee? Let's go to the traditional Christmas story of the birth of Jesus. There are 3 individuals: the mother of the child, the partner of the mother, and the child. And read your Bible. They are refugees. A lot of politics going on, a lot of fear. The Roman Empire is acting out in a dark way, and they're on the road. They're on the road. The mother of Jesus was not married to someone at the time. And so not only were they dealing with Roman ideas, but they were dealing with Jewish ideas as well. We forget about that sometimes. How that put Mary into that position. Now, mythologically speaking, metaphysically speaking, that's important. Because they were really vulnerable. But they had a call. They had a call. And sometimes in our refuginess, we can find ourselves in places that Ernest Holmes would say, we are in conflict with the high estate. I love that. That's a really old-fashioned term. The high estate. That means that higher place that we occupy. We would call that the Christ consciousness. The high estate, the higher self. Why? Because they're literally sleeping in a barn behind a Motel 6. Because there's no room at the Motel 6. However, they have the call. That deep yearning inside that something needs to change. Do you know how powerful that is? We call it desire. I work in a field where desire is everything. Because without the desire, the call doesn't come, isn't heard. And I'm not talking about from outside, I'm talking about from within. There are people who struggle so much with the desire that they can't hear the call. You see, when Dr. Carolyn talks about the belief systems that don't allow people to grab a hold of their higher consciousness, she's not whistling Dixie. That's incredibly powerful in those meager circumstances. So then, in another place somewhere, we talk about these three mystics, mystical teachers. They're hanging out in some temple somewhere, well established religiously. They have some wealth. Why? Why do we know that they have wealth? Because they bring gifts, which were very expensive. And one of them, or three of them, looks out a window one night and sees a light out there and says, wow, there's a call out there. There's a call out there for a greater consciousness. You see, what Charles Fillmore tells us, for those of you who sustain yourself through the Bible, Charles Fillmore says the book of the Bible itself is a demonstration of going from one level of consciousness to another. The Old Testament to the New Testament. Now, if you ever read the Old Testament, fire and brimstone, mafia stuff, people hurting each other, pillars of salt, all kinds of carnage. Then you come to the end of the Old Testament, except for the Psalms. I don't even know why it's there, but it's beautiful. But you come to the end of that, then you flip over. And now you have the Christ consciousness coming forward. It's a new day. The Magi, or the great mystics, or the old teachers of that old religion, see a star and they say, oh my God, there's a shift in our spiritual consciousness. And so they go there with their gifts. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. All of them very valuable in the old world. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh, let me see if I can find it here, represent symbol of the inner resources open to the Christ ideal, a consciousness stored up through other incarnational insights as that wisdom from within. Other incarnational insights, the universal insights, are coming forth in this new incarnation. Now, why is it important that they bring these expensive gifts? Because those three individuals who have the call, who have their little suitcase walking into the door of the class, the seminar, the workshop, they're not sure if they're going to make it. They're not even sure of what they're doing. But the old masters come along and say, these are your birthright. You're on the right track. How many of you have been in a vulnerable position where the most important thing you heard is, you're in the right place. You're on the right track. We've all been there. That's what I was alluding to earlier. We have a loss in our life. We have something sets us back. We're back on our heels. And there's these people. When I say they know the truth for you until you can know it for yourself, do you know how incredible that is? That's a birthright. I know you as your birthright. Not this struggle, not this barn that you're sleeping in. Not this journey that you're making as a refugee. I know the truth of you. And the truth of you is that you are a great consciousness coming forward. And then if we look a little bit deeper, so we have gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold is what it is. We know what gold is, but frankincense and myrrh, these are ancient elixirs that come from the natural world. And the Egyptians used them in their funerary practices. That's weird. Why are you bringing a funerary practice things to this as a gift? And basically that means that the wise one said, not only are you on the right journey, this journey will sustain you through the rest of your life. That's how important it is. And when we find ourselves in a vulnerable place, don't we want to hear that? You're on the right track. And you're going to be on the right track for a long time. There's someone when I was at the Center for Spiritual Living in Paradise, someone who meant a great deal to me, an older practitioner. She'd been been in metaphysics much longer than I had, and she was on our board. And sometimes on the board you encounter things that are challenging, and she would always say, "That which has gotten us this far will get us all the way." So can you imagine Joseph and Mary and the child? Don't worry, what's gotten you this far is going to get you all the way. I love that. That's what Joseph Campbell talks about. It is the bridge. It is the bridge. In poking around in the Bible in the last couple weeks, getting ready for today, there was another parable in the Bible. It's also in the New Testament. And it's my favorite story now. It's my favorite story since I came into this teaching. When I was younger in another religion, it wasn't my favorite story because I was in a tradition that if you were screwing up, they called you the prodigal child. That was kind of a derogatory term, like, we're not sure if we're going to hang on to you because you're the prodigal child. It was used in a negative way. Ernest Holmes took that, and he calls all of us the prodigal. First of all, I love that. Everyone's the prodigal. Why? Because of the hero's journey. Because when the prodigal decides to go out there and experience what there is in this world in terms of trying to find out who they truly are, and they found out that it was a struggle, it was a challenge. At one time they, I don't want to be binary. At one time they went to work on a farm that raised pigs, and so again in the Jewish tradition that's not an acceptable thing, but he did that. Nothing against pigs, but that's that tradition, and I honor that. And his life had taken him to such a challenging place that when he fed the pigs, he was eating with them what he was feeding them. That's how low he went. But when he finally decides, and he hears the call to find his way into his birthright, which he didn't believe that he deserved, it said as he approached and came back from his journey, there was a parental figure who came forward and hugged him and placed a ring upon his finger. And if you look at the metaphysical ideas around placing rings on fingers, it is a birthright. You belong. And that ring on your finger is going to sustain you for the rest of your spiritual journey. When Dr. Carolyn talked about that, she's talking about bridges of journeys that will go a lifetime. A lifetime. These journeys that we make. And I think that to me is what is so beautiful around this seasonal time in terms of us looking at this story in the way that we look at it, is that my greatest wish for all of you is that on Christmas morning or every morning when you wake up and you go under the tree, you find your bridge that meets your call, that will unveil the Christ consciousness in all of you, which is your birthright. It's already there. It just has to be pulled out. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you so much.